Why did they lock the finale script down like evidence? At the last table read, copies were collected and destroyed, and call sheets used a tough nut to crack. Today I'll show what most fans never figured out, and why it still matters.
I'm a nervous wreck. My stomach aches, my neck is killing me, I can't turn. Look.
You're turning?
No, it's not a good turn.
In 2009, the full cast showed up on Curb Your Enthusiasm to stage a fake Seinfeld reboot, and that reunion felt huge because it almost never happened. Most fans picture them hanging out after tapings, yet the real setup stayed way more like a workplace. Jason Alexander later called them workmates, and he said they lived very different lives. When you hear that, does it change how you read their chemistry, or does it make it even more impressive? Jerry Seinfeld already had his real circle before the show exploded in the early 1990s. Larry David sat at the center of that world, and Jerry also had New York comics and real-life connections tied to the material. Jason described it in a way that sounds almost funny. Jerry already had 3 friends, so there was no natural reason to fold the cast into his personal life. It sounds small, but it explains everything about why the group rarely became a hangout crew. Jason also joked that people assume they still spend weekends together, and he has to explain that the group basically stopped seeing each other once the work stopped. It sounds cold until you picture the schedule, table reads, rehearsals, filming in front of a live audience, then doing it again and again for 9 seasons. That routine builds trust fast, yet it also makes privacy feel priceless, especially once fame turns a normal dinner into an event. Here's the quiet part. Distance does not mean dislike. On set, they had to listen hard, hit marks, and keep timing razor tight, and that takes real respect. The show worked because the rhythm stayed precise and repeatable, like musicians locking into the same groove every week.
Listen to this. Marcy comes over and she tells me that her ex-boyfriend was over late last night and yada, yada, yada. I'm really tired today.
That is why the characters feel like your own friend group, even if the actors went home to separate lives. Then you get those rare peaks that feel oversized, like Jerry posting a Christmas Eve 2025 photo with Julia and Larry David. One photo triggers an internet spiral because the default was silence, and silence invites fantasy. If the cast truly lived like the characters, that photo would feel normal. Instead, it felt like a surprise drop. So the "they were best friends" story mostly lived inside the set walls. And once you see that, one quiet rule on that set starts to sound even more powerful because it controlled what the audience felt.
See, you know how to take the reservation, you just don't know how to hold the reservation. And that's really the most important part of the reservation.
And it also shaped how the cast worked together. That rule explains why a sitcom could feel warm while staying emotionally closed. Larry David ran to the writer's room with one line that became show law: no hugging, no learning. That rule sounds simple, yet it changed everything about how episodes ended. Most sitcoms chase a sweet moment before the credits, but Seinfeld treated sweetness like a problem that needed fixing. One writer later remembered Larry warning them there would be no hugging and no learning in the scripts, and the staff followed it completely. So what does that actually look like on screen? It means characters can wreck a relationship, lose a job, or embarrass themselves in public, and the next week they still walk into Monk's like nothing is stuck.
You wouldn't even have any teeth if it wasn't for me taking you over to Joe's fruit stand and stuffing cantaloupe down your throat. But so much for gratitude. Yeah.
That reset kept the show sharp, because nobody grew into a better person and nobody got saved by a moral. You watch them double down, and you laugh because honesty feels a little uncomfortable. You can see the rule in The Chinese Restaurant, where the whole episode takes place while they wait for a table.
In the cab? Chinese food in a cab?
We'll eat it in the movie.
What? Where do you think you're going? Do you think that they have big picnic tables there?
NBC executives questioned the script because nothing happens, and that complaint tells you how unusual Seinfeld was at the time. The waiting becomes the story, the anxiety becomes the punchline, and the lack of a payoff becomes the point. That is 23 minutes of tension with no lesson at the end, and it still works. That rule also pushed the cast into a specific performance style. Without a warm ending, every petty line had to land clean. So Jerry stayed dry, George stayed selfish, Elaine stayed sharp, and Kramer stayed chaotic. If a scene drifted toward softness, the writing pulled it back, and the acting had to follow. The result was a hard comedic edge that made the show feel different from the rest of network TV.
Tell them that my sister died. My poor sister died. She was standing on the street, and then she was laughing, and then they shot her.
Now, connect that to a bigger story problem. George getting engaged to Susan created pressure because marriage pushes a character toward growth, stability, and learning. Seinfeld refused that direction, so the writers needed an exit that matched the rule, and they picked something dark enough that it still shocks people today. Once you accept that no hugging, no learning ruled everything, Susan's fate stops looking random and starts looking like an exact fit. And the real reason behind that choice gets even messier when you hear what happened off camera. If you are enjoying this story, give this video some hype right now. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me your favorite Seinfeld character, because the next detail flips how you see the cast. On May 16, 1996, Seinfeld aired The Invitations, and Susan Ross died from toxic glue on cheap wedding envelopes. A network sitcom killing a main girlfriend that way felt wild, and the punchline landed even darker. George shows relief instead of grief. Viewers remember the laugh, but the real story sits in why the writers aimed for that exact kind of ending. In 2015, Jason Alexander finally explained the tension during a Howard Stern interview. He called Heidi Swedberg, who played Susan, a terrific girl, yet he admitted he said the on-screen rhythm never clicked for him. That confession matters because Seinfeld depends on timing so tight that one offbeat can throw an entire scene. When the rhythm does not click, the actors feel it instantly, and the audience feels it even if they cannot name it. Jason said the mismatch was not a personal attack, it was a comedy problem. He also said other cast members did scenes with her and felt the same friction. Then Julia Louis-Dreyfus joked, "Do you just want to kill her?" And Larry David snapped his fingers and turned that line into a story. Susan dies, George stays single, and the show keeps its no-learning engine intact. The fallout landed fast once those interview clips spread. Headlines made it sound like Heidi was the problem, and Jason hated how that looked. He posted an apology the next day that began, "Okay, folks, I feel officially awful," and he stressed that the cast liked her and never wanted to hurt her. He framed it as his own insecurity about performance, mixed with the writers needing a way out of marrying George. Heidi also dealt with real-world reactions. Fans confronted her on the street and vented about Susan's fate like it was a real death. She later said she understood the anger because the core four were not nice people, and the show worked by letting them say things others hide. That comment makes the envelope scene feel even colder because it shows the show knew exactly what it was doing. So yes, that death solved a plot issue, but it also exposed how ruthless the comedy machine could be. And once the show proved it would choose cruelty over comfort, the finale becomes easier to predict, even if you hated it. On May 14, 1998, NBC aired the finale, and about 76 million viewers tuned in. That number alone tells you the pressure, because almost nobody gets a live audience that huge for a sitcom ending.
But hear me and hear me well. The day will come. Oh, yes. Mark my words, Seinfeld. Your day of reckoning is coming when an evil...
Fans expected a warm goodbye, yet the episode delivered a courtroom trial that treated 9 seasons of behavior like evidence. Why would a show that people loved end by putting its own characters on trial? Larry David came back to write the finale after leaving at the end of season 7, and he stayed loyal to the show's core rules. Jerry also had no interest in a sentimental ending. Instead of hugs, the episode builds a parade of witnesses, like the soup Nazi and others, and turns old jokes into accusations. The structure feels like a courtroom roast, and that choice made the ending feel like a comment on the audience as much as the characters. The cast also knew the script needed protection because leaks could ruin the event. The table read happened on a set, script copies were collected, and extra pages got destroyed. Crew call sheets used the fake title, A Tough Nut, to hide what they were filming, and they even shot an alternate verdict where the jury says, not guilty, just to confuse anyone hunting spoilers. When the finale hit, backlash arrived immediately. Some fans felt punished for caring, and that reaction stayed loud for years. Julia Louis-Dreyfus later addressed the divide without attacking anyone, saying there is no such thing as a perfect ending. That line matters because it shows the cast understood the risk, and they still went ahead with the choice. Here is what people rarely think about. The cast had to carry that split reaction while also protecting the show's legacy. Publicly, they stayed careful because if the stars admitted doubts, the finale debate would swallow every other achievement. Years later, Larry cracked a smile at the whole fight when Curb Your Enthusiasm ended in 2024 with a jail scene and the line, "This is how we should have ended the finale."
This is how we should have ended the finale.
Oh my God, you're right. How did we not think of that?
And Julia said she loved that he finally got to answer the criticism his way. So the finale stayed divisive by design, and the cast kept their private thoughts tighter than people realized. The strangest part is that money decisions behind the scenes shaped the relationships even more than the ending did, and it all came down to one clause viewers never see. In 1997, the Season 9 pay deals became public, and they were huge. The supporting three landed $600,000 per episode, while Jerry Seinfeld signed for about $1 million per episode. Those numbers made headlines, and they also created a false picture that everyone walked away with the same long-term win. Salary looks like the whole story until you hear what Jason Alexander said later about the part that mattered more than the paycheck. Jason explained that he, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and Michael Richards negotiated together, and they wanted a share of the show's future profits. That means the back-end money, the piece tied to syndication and later formats, where the real long-term wealth lives. They ended up with a big salary and no back-end percentage, and Jason said that choice created a rift. Do you see how one line in a contract can change how people feel about their place in something they helped build? Here is the simple difference. A salary stops when production stops. Ownership keeps paying every time the show sells again. Jason said the three still earn millions through residuals and union formulas, so nobody walked away broke. Yet the gap between residuals and ownership is enormous over decades. Jerry and Larry David had ownership stakes, which means the money story looks completely different for them. Jason also said time softened the tension because the rift belonged to a specific window after the show ended. People moved on, careers grew, and the pay fight turned into history that felt less personal over time.
I can't give details. I'm not in the mood.
You're not in the mood? Well, you get in the mood!
Still, that clause shaped choices because ownership gives freedom to wait, while smaller long-term payouts push you to keep working. That difference changes how a life feels, even when everyone looks rich on paper. Fans usually talk about who got the best jokes, yet the bigger power shift happened in negotiations. Seinfeld became a billionaire brand for the people with stakes, while the co-stars became respected working legends with a very different money curve. That reality sat in the background during the final season, and it fed into how final the last week felt on set. So when people ask what truly changed their lives, the answer sits in a contract detail almost nobody reads. And the last day of filming made that permanent in a way no paycheck ever could. Around 76.3 million people watched the finale, making it the fourth most watched series finale in American TV history, and some networks even ran static images because competing felt pointless. Those numbers look huge from the outside, but inside the studio, the end felt small and personal. The cast knew it was over before the audience did, and the security around the script made that obvious. By the time the finale went into production, it wasn't just an episode anymore. It was an event. Julia Louis-Dreyfus later said she felt very undone on the last day of taping. That phrase lands because it sounds controlled, yet it points to a real emotional crash. A live audience still laughed, but every laugh carried a strange finality because they knew each entrance, each pause, and each little mistake would never happen again in that room. Right before filming the final scene, Jerry gathered Julia, Jason, and Michael and gave them a short speech that still hits. He said, "For the rest of our lives, when anyone thinks of one of us, they will think of all four of us." Then he added, "I cannot think of three people I would rather have that be true of." And that line turned co-workers into a shared life sentence in the best and weirdest way. Then they filmed the final scene in a jail cell, still bickering, still petty, still exactly themselves. No hugs, no lessons, no warm goodbye, because the show refused to change even at the finish line. Outside that studio, the world treated it like an event. Inside, it felt like a door closing on a very specific kind of daily life. Years later, Larry David echoed the same jail image in 2024 on Curb with the line, "This is how we should have ended the finale."
This is how we should have ended the finale.
Oh my God, you're right. How did we not think of that?
And it felt less like a joke and more like a confession that the debate never stopped. That is the part that keeps fans digging, because the cast still leaves pieces out when they talk. And if they still hold back after all these years, what exactly stays unsaid?
The Honorable Judge Arthur Vandelay presiding.
Vandelay? The judge's name is Vandelay?
Vander who?
Jerry, did you hear that? Yeah. I think that's a good sign.
Seinfeld left clues in plain sight, and the cast still dodges the sharpest questions. Drop your surprise in the comments, then tap the next video now before this feeling fades.